All right. Well, this has been a fabulous day, and I want to thank Barbara who walked in. I agree with Barbara. We have saved the best for last. There's no question. Whenever I do a service event, I always say we have to hear from young people who are serving or have served because they understand what it's all about because they're at the ground level. So I'm so excited about this panel. I want to thank my dear friend Bill Galston for his over-the-top comments. I did have the privilege of helping to start City Year, but it wasn't me. It was a group of people that came. I did it with my best friend and college roommate, Michael Brown, and others. And it was a small group of thoughtful, dedicated people. And what made it work, it wasn't me, it wasn't Michael. It was that people, when they experience this, love this idea. And I am incredibly honored to be here. It's like a family reunion for me with service legends and giants. My brother, John Bridgeland, who I've worked with closely for 20 years, who still, thanks to Bridge and President George W. Bush, they got the largest increase in AmeriCorps ever, 50%. Amazing. Bill Galston, who, yes, he visited City Year, but then he went into the White House and made it happen. Susan Stroud, who's been carrying this torch forever, domestically and internationally, helping to spread this idea all over the world. Steve Culbertson, who was here, who's there, who has built the service movement for young people, service learning, changing the world, showing that you can be 9, 10, 8, 12 years old and change the world through service. So many people here have built this movement. It's really amazing. I want to thank Belle and Brookings. Belle is a hero. I mean, she has put the issue of poverty, opportunity, the middle class on the national agenda, and it's amazing how she just keeps coming up with new ideas, advance the cause, but she also is action-oriented, and I'm so glad that we've been able to embrace the service movement, bringing Brookings and the Service Year Alliance together. I want to thank Jesse, who is fabulous. When I called Jesse about taking this job, he said, well, I do believe that it's time for a new generation to take the lead, and honestly, Jesse, I can't wait. And also Deval Patrick, who is a dear friend. I mean, there's no one who gets this more from his own personal experience and speaks so eloquently. I want to thank them. My chairman, Joe Heck. I am so honored to serve on this commission with Joe. We are so fortunate. He has done an amazing job leading us. I think that we've come together in such a great way, showing it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat, serving the military or civilian service, we can find common ground on this issue, and you've provided an amazing leadership, Joe. And Barbara, of course, who is doing such a fabulous job leading the Corporation for National Service. You've really put wind in the sails for the whole movement, and we are blessed to have your leadership. Just a couple of thoughts. So I love what everybody's talked about. I am with the folks who've said, we have to take this to scale. It's urgent. I honestly believe there is no idea that is more important to helping us fulfill our fundamental mission of a country, which is to form that more perfect union and to have liberty and justice for all, than national service. And when I say that, I'm reminded of two of my great mentors who I know are with us here, whose on shoulders we stand. Harris Wofford, who always emphasized the for all, who from his days in the World War II Army Air Corps, literally to his last breath, was advocating for and fighting for and saying we have to have universal national service. Unbelievable hero. And Eli Siegel, who is the founder of AmeriCorps, who, without whom President Clinton had the vision, and Bill Galston was there in the White House, but it was Eli who'd been an entrepreneur, who understood politics, who knew how to get things done. You think about how Washington is today, that AmeriCorps legislation got passed within 9 months, big bipartisan vote. And then the program was launched within a year. And thanks to Eli and Harris and other champions, Senator Kennedy, Senator Hatch, et cetera, 1.1 million people have served in AmeriCorps in the past 25 years. Over 250,000 people have served in the Peace Corps, 58 years old. We know this works. It's not rocket science. And as you'll hear from these young people, we have to take it to scale. From my own personal experience, I can tell you, national service changes your life. I met my wonderful wife, Vanessa Kirsch, who founded Public Allies, at a conference for service leaders and social entrepreneurs. So if you're looking for love, join the service movement. It works. And I say that because at its essence, what the service movement is about is spreading more love in the world. I love what Peter said. I agree with you, Bill. It was like a benediction. He said that national service touches people's souls. And if we could get to 1 million people a year, it will touch and change America's soul. And we need that. There is nothing more powerful than love. As Dr. King said, who said everybody should be great because everybody can serve, he also said, darkness cannot stamp out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot stamp out hate. Only love can do that. And that's what the movement's about. So, I want to turn it over now to these fabulous young leaders who are every day showing us what the service movement is about. I'm just going to briefly say who they are and then give each of you a couple of minutes just to share your story, why you joined the service movement, what you did, what you've gotten out of it. We have William Gartman, who's an AmeriCorps alumnus from Youth Build, amazing program. Dorothy Stoneman is a national hero and icon, force of justice. Youth Build USA and the Education Alliance. We have Andrew Hanson. I'm not sure if I got these all in the right order. We've got Tawan, sorry. Reed, who's a field team leader with FEMA Corps and AmeriCorps and CCC. We've got Kayla Wetzel, an AmeriCorps member from City Year, D.C. We've got Andrew Hanson, who's the Environmental Stewardship Program team leader for the Delaware State Parks. And we have Taylor Stone, who's an AmeriCorps Vista member, Project Development Habitat for Humanity. So why don't we just start right here.
My name's William Gartman. I'm from Elkins, West Virginia, and I completed an AmeriCorps term with Youth Build North Central and with the Education Alliance. And
It's okay.
Now, after completing my AmeriCorps term, I've continued to be involved with Youth Build. I'm the head of the mentor program, and I sit as the sous chef at the Vintage, where we take in other Youth Build members and train them to do that as well.
Terrific.
Hello, my name is Tawan Reed. I am, as Ellen said, a field team leader for FEMA Corps. I served for about 6 months in Puerto Rico, helping to support disaster recovery efforts from Hurricanes Irma and Maria. We're now currently serving with the Office of External Affairs here in D.C. It's been an amazing opportunity. I'm sure I'll have time to talk about that in a minute, but it's honestly changed my life. One of the first things that I ever read about the program before I actually learned about any details was a team leader said that it was the hardest but most rewarding year of their life. And now that my service term is up next month, I can completely agree. So I'm grateful. And I also want to say just really quickly, very briefly, I'm extremely honored to be here. So I want to thank Samantha Warfield for reaching out to my campus and allowing me this opportunity to be able to speak. So thank you very much. Also to Barbara Stewart, the president of the CNCS. I'm very grateful, director, I'm sorry. Very, very grateful to be here, as well as among, generals and some of the most intellectual people I've heard speak in a long time. This is grateful. I'm excited. I think that's why I'm just kind of rambling. But I'm very grateful, so thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kayla Wetzel. I am from Glendale, Maryland. I currently serve at City Year, Washington, D.C. as a team leader. This is my second year serving. Last year I served at Bancroft Elementary School, which is a bilingual elementary school. We focus on making sure that all of our students are bilingual in Spanish. I served in third grade mathematics, which is in English and in Spanish. I'm not very fluent, but the students are teaching me as well, so I am a student to them. I came across City Year at my college university. I went to Delaware State University, and we had a career fair. At first, I was not interested because I was looking for internships. However, last summer, I came across an Instagram post, and it really just sparked my interest in City Year once again. I love the mission, and it really aligned with my general purpose. And ultimately, it's the reason why I'm here today. I'm very grateful to be here, and thank you.
Morning or afternoon, I don't know what we're at this point. My name is Andrew Hanson. I'm originally from Philadelphia, or just outside of Philadelphia, so go Birds again. I am a U.S. Army veteran. I served 4.5 years. A few years ago, I moved to Delaware. Kind of just happened, didn't really have a plan in mind. I was looking to transition into natural resources, but I do not have a college degree. And to be a field biologist, that's kind of a thing you kind of need. While I was in Delaware, I started doing a lot of volunteering, and I heard about the Delaware State Parks Veterans Conservation Corps, an award-winning AmeriCorps grant program, part of the Corps network. Did I get all that? Thank you. She usually throws M&Ms at me if I get it all right. I don't. I served 2 tours with, or I should say, I served 2 terms with the Vet Corps. They were close enough to tours at that point. Before ultimately being hired by Delaware State Parks as and this doesn't really fit on a business card, but Seasonal Environmental Stewardship Program Team Leader. In the summertime, there's an additional title added to the bottom of that, which is for the Coastal Parks Internship Program. So I just tell people I'm a biological aide for the state of Delaware because apparently the state pays for business cards by the letter, and I don't get many to give out. Ultimately, I'm here to ask each and every one of you and anyone who gets to see this a question. Barbara has heard me ask this question before, but the question is this. If you have the ability to affect positive change, do you have the moral obligation to do so? Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name's Taylor. I am currently serving as an AmeriCorps Vista with Habitat for Humanity International. I also served a previous term with a Habitat for Humanity affiliate in Denver, Colorado. And there I was working as a construction crew leader on the build site, so leading volunteers in building homes. And now I'm doing something a little bit different back in the office, and I help to create learning resources that we can spread to habitat organizations throughout the nation to help educate and mobilize our volunteers and the general public. So a little bit about me. I got into Habitat in college, and that was also my first experience with AmeriCorps. I actually did a quarter-time AmeriCorps program in college called Jumpstart. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's an early literacy program where a team of Corps members goes into preschools and helps them develop their early literacy skills. So that was my first exposure to AmeriCorps. And then when I started to develop a passion for housing affordability and Habitat's mission in college through our Habitat campus chapter, I decided to kind of blend those 2 experiences with AmeriCorps, with Jumpstart and through Habitat, and decided to do my year of AmeriCorps with Habitat after college. And then I got a lot out of it and loved it so much that I decided to come back for a second year.
Thank you. True service warrior there. Andrew, I love what you said. If you have the opportunity to affect change, you have a moral obligation to do so. So you have served in the military, civilian service, you've done it all. Senator McCain said that really military and national civilian service are 2 sides of the same coin. General McChrystal, who I've had the honor of working with at the Service Year Alliance, is really barnstorming the country saying exactly the same thing. Tell us, what was similar about your service in the military and your AmeriCorps service, and what was different, and what did you learn from each? And why was it valuable for you to do both?
Take a moment here. I'm sorry about that. Task and purpose. Everyone operating together for the same cause. My particular program was a little bit different because it was made up of veterans and dependents, so everyone had already known the mission and been on the mission. But it's definitely the teamwork aspect, working together, common task and purpose towards a goal, something in mind to do, and you get that sense of accomplishment. It was a little bit different because working with dependents were also in our program. So there wasn't necessarily that drive in them already, that sense of duty to let's accomplish the mission. And there was a mentorship factor to that. How can we bring them into our group so they understand where we're coming from?
Terrific. Thank you. Kayla, I'm a little bit familiar with the program you serve in. Can you share what's some of the most important things you've gained personally from your city or experience in AmeriCorps?
Some of the things that I personally gained was a sense of commitment. Completing a service year takes a lot, from the long hours to commuting to your service site every day, and as well as personal challenges that you may face. It really took a lot of me, but I knew that I was showing up every day for my students, so I had to really, even on the days that I might not have wanted to get up because we had to get up really, really early, but I knew that what motivated me the most was to show up every day for my students because they need someone that's going to ultimately be there for them. I would say also a sense of independence. I am from Maryland, however, you really have to drive everywhere, but coming into DC every day, I learned how to really ride the metro, get around to various places within Washington, D.C. As well. I would say that being in an elementary school setting, you really have to learn how to control your own emotions because the students they're still very young and they don't always have a sense of their own emotional awareness. So I really learned a lot about that this year and last year, my first service year, because sometimes we want to just react, but in an elementary school, you can't just react because you have to see how your actions take an account on your students. The last thing that I learned is having an empathy for English language learners. Like I previously said, my school is a bilingual elementary school, so a lot of the students there are not from the United States of America. They're from all over the world, honestly, but it's hard when you're learning two different languages, especially if we have one student, he's from Finland. He doesn't really know English, and he doesn't really know Spanish, so it's hard for him to necessarily grasp all the concepts, and even with our Latino and Hispanic students as well, getting grasp on English so they can learn, as well as being on grade level with their Spanish as well. So these are all things that I've gained through service.
Thank you, Kayla. That's great. William, the needs and the job prospects in a rural community like Elkins, where you've served, is very different from urban areas. How has your experience with Youth Build helped you in your career decisions, and what should policymakers and people know about how to be effective and what national service can do in rural communities?
So before I joined Youth Build, I was already working as a chef, but there was some reluctance to move me up or promote me or increase my pay based on my lack of schooling. And Youth Build obviously helped me get my high school equivalents and achieve a lot of leadership skills. And that's the case for a lot of people in West Virginia because we have a very high student-to-teacher ratio. It's about 50 students to one teacher. So we have a lot of people struggling in classrooms and, unfortunately, a pretty high dropout rate. But when I got to Youth Build, I was taught, everybody's taught when they're in school and they do something bad, they're labeled as a failure. And when you fail something, it can start to leave you broken inside. And when I got to Youth Build, I learned that it's okay to break sometimes, because if you never break, then you never learn to put yourself back together. And after I got and prepared myself at Youth Build with their help, it really gave me my confidence back. And that was something I needed to negotiate a pay raise and to get to that next level. And it helped me a lot with my next AmeriCorps term too, because I had gone back into the school that I failed at and was going to mentor the youths and face those same people. But I tried not to keep that in mind. I kept my focus on the youth and wanted to do the things for them that I never had as a student myself. So with that in mind, I had great success in that program, and I made great bonds with those kids. And at the end of the year, I had a 90% turnaround rate in their ABC criteria. So to be able to do a good job and to contribute AmeriCorps and Youth Build for that happening is amazing. And for me to be able to sit here and talk to you guys, I would have never thought that I would, if you would have came here and pulled me off the dish tank about 4 years ago and told me I'd be sitting in front of a lot of people in D.C., I would have asked if that warranted me a break for the night. But here I am. So when I went into Youth Build, I kind of learned a new thought process, because when you get out of school and you get into something like that, you have a certain way of thinking about yourself. And it's almost like we call them sheep, and nowadays you're thinking kind of reluctantly and moving on. But in the words of Alexander the Great, I'm not afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep. I'm afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion. And today, I stand before you a lion, and I tell all the kids I work with, be a lion, because that's the most important thing you can do for yourself.
William, thank you for sharing that very powerful story. I've known Dorothy. She was actually one of the first people to get behind us who were starting City Year, and I've had the privilege of meeting with a lot of young people who've done Youth Build, and that's a very powerful story. But I also know it's not a unique story. It's an incredibly powerful, impactful program, and thank you for sharing that. And we need to get you in front of more people in Washington, D.C., down the street. Taylor, I love that you did Jumpstart. I didn't know that. And, we've often talked about a continuum of service, and I mentioned Steve. People can start with service learning in school, and they can do service in college, and then you decided to do Habitat, and you're in your second year. So can you tell us, how do you know you've had an impact? And what's the difference between sort of your first year with Habitat, when you were doing more direct service work, and now this year where you're really trying to help the organization as a whole?
Sure. I think the impacts obviously look drastically different. So, on the work site, I was able to lead volunteers in the building of 2 duplexes during my year there. So that is, an additional 4 families that we were able to serve through my service, which is awesome. And that's a more tangible impact that I can see. And so now what I'm doing now is a little more bit, behind the scenes. But I still know that I'm making an impact. And how I draw a connection between my 2 years of service is when I was on the build site last year, a lot of times what would happen is volunteers would come out and it would be their first time volunteering with Habitat for Humanity. And they would love it. And I am a firm believer that it is through volunteer service that we can change minds and hearts, and I saw that firsthand on the work site. You get these people who don't know about Habitat or who don't know about the importance of home affordability, and their volunteer experience gets them to care. And I think that that's the first step. And that also, kind of happened with me in college with Habitat. My own volunteer experience is what got me to care about these important issues. But so now you have a volunteer who cares and they want to do something more. And that's where I see my role fitting in this year. I help create, like I said, those resources for Habitat organizations across the country to help educate their volunteers and their audiences more on the issue of home affordability. And so these resources that I'm helping to create now are going directly back to those Habitat organizations that I've worked with in the past, those same volunteers, and giving them more of a educated view on the issue and helping them learn next steps. So what can I do next now that I care about the issue? How can I influence my elected officials or whoever to also care? And that's the resources that I'm helping provide to those volunteers that I just spent the last year serving with. So I think, it's 2 very different years of service. One's a little more concrete, but they both connect in, bringing the issues and helping our communities care.
Thank you very much, Taylor. That's a great story. So, Tawan, you're in your second year, almost finishing up your second year with, first year. Excuse me, with NCCC FEMA Corps. I was thinking more about your plans after. So tell me, you were telling me a little bit before this, why you decided to join, and how do you know you've had an impact? And what are you thinking about, because you're finishing up in November, right? What do you think about doing next?
Okay. So to backtrack just a little bit, I guess, in my own personal story, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. And if you know much about the place, it's not exactly a friendly place. And in the inner city, there really aren't a lot of options, I think, for a lot of people. I remember my senior year specifically, every Tuesday and Thursday, we had military recruiters set up outside of the cafeteria. And I am not against the military at all. I have several members of my family who are part of the military. I think it's an extremely honorable thing to do. But it's not for me personally. So since that point, I've always wanted to do something that would allow me to give back to this country, because I do love the U.S. Of course, it's not perfect. Nothing is. But this country, I think, gives people so much opportunity. There's so much freedom and democracy, that is here. And I wanted to do something that would allow me to give back to people, to serve my country. But I knew that being in the military wasn't for me, so I had to find a way to do something that would allow me to still do that and still have an impact on people, and to not think about myself for once, because that was something that I struggled with for a while. So fast forward a bit, after college, I truly had no idea what I wanted to do. I was extremely just lost. I got my degree in IT, and everybody likes doing IT, so they made it a little difficult when it came to finding a job. So I wanted to do something that would allow me to give back. I spoke with Alan earlier this morning, and I told him a little bit of my story as far as how my family was affected by Hurricane Katrina and what that did to me. FEMA helped my family out quite a bit, quite substantially. I mean, going from being homeless with a lot of my family to actually being put up in homes and being able to sustain, their lives like to this day. So sorry, I'm getting like a little choked up, but because of that, I always wanted to do something to give back. And so when I heard about AmeriCorps specifically, and then I heard about FEMA Corps, I was like, wow, okay. So this gives me an opportunity to be able to serve people, but also to be able to give back to the exact same agency that provided my family with help in a time in which they really needed it. And I'm extremely grateful, for FEMA for that. And so after, I guess, my term of service, I'm still a little unsure. There are a lot of things that I want to do. I really would like to work for FEMA. That's just a dream, is doing things in emergency management. Prior to that, I did wildland firefighting for a bit. I served in Ohio, Oklahoma, Colorado. Really enjoyed doing that. So that gave me like my first taste, so to speak, into what emergency management looks like. And then actually work for FEMA, which is a little bit different because I'm not, digging hand lines anymore. I'm in an office, so that's been a big change. But I still feel that I'm impacting the world in some way. And I think the best example I can give of that is during my first round of service this year, we served in Puerto Rico, and we went out to Utuado, which is one of the more mountainous regions within Puerto Rico. And we went out to inspect bridges and a few different rivers that traveled along that particular municipality. And it was really heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time. It was heartbreaking because they talked about during the hurricanes how people could not get food and water to those more mountainous regions because bridges were completely destroyed. There were no ways for them to get those supplies to those people. But it was heartwarming to know that I was actually there trying to do what I could to help to get some inspections done, to submit this information to people that can actually affect policy change on a much larger scale than I ever could as one individual. And I think, to me, that's what national service is supposed to be about, is, an entire community of people trying to come together to build a better and more sustainable future for everyone within, the U.S. And of course, things like Peace Corps, are very focused on doing things outside of the U.S. But my mom always says, how can you take care of someone else if you can't take care of yourself? And so for me, that's a really big thing about doing community service, especially within the U.S., is we have some of the same problems that other countries have. So I believe that we should definitely focus, our efforts and things into making sure that our country is doing well as well. And then I think we're much better prepared to handle other countries' issues as well. So I think I just kind of skipped over that one question. But
No, you're doing great.
Afterwards, though, I really would like to work for FEMA. That's my plan. Specifically doing IT because I love computers. Anything network related, I love it. So I really would like the opportunity to do that, or for some other government agency. I want to do something in emergency management. I can't say that enough. I want to do something that will allow me every day of my job to be doing something to benefit myself. Very last thing I'll say is one of the first things they taught us during team leader training for FEMA Corps. They made us repeat this mantra constantly over and over, and it's not about you. And that was something that really got drilled into my head, and I feel that I live that now because doing community service is not about me. It's not about the things that I got of it. It's about what I can do to benefit other people. So,
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that very powerful story. I see my chairman's head nodding because we've talked a lot about how there's military recruiters everywhere. A lot of people don't join the military. They're not even eligible, but then they should have the option to do what you did on your own, which is find civilian service. And FEMA would be lucky to get you. And as a taxpayer, I would be lucky to have you to continue your service. So the previous panel talked about how there's been this big authorization for AmeriCorps, 250,000 people in the Serve America Act, and yet we don't get them funding. Kayla, I love what you said about you did it because of your kids, because of the students. That's what kept you going, getting up at 5 in the morning, very early, staying really late. So I'm going to start with you, but anybody else who wants to jump in. So we are in the nation's capital. Just down the street, there are people who are very powerful who make decisions about resources. I wish they were all in this room right now. But if you had a chance to talk to the policymakers who decide, should we invest more money in national service or not, what would you say to them to try to convince them that it's worth it? I'll start with Kayla, and then if anybody else wants to jump in on that.
I believe that all millennials and people of the generations younger than me, and even older, should be invested in national service. What would get more people into national service is that there were, I think, more benefits. I say this because as a millennial, I know that a lot of my peers are really invested into like getting big paychecks and getting cars and houses and things like that and really building their careers and lives. But one thing that I know is that I'm not chasing the money. So you have to get more people, I feel like, that have the same mindset as myself, because giving back, it takes a lot and it's a huge time commitment. However, it is worth it. I think I answered the question.
Yes, you have.
Okay.
Very well, thank you. Anybody else want to take a stab at that? If you could sit in front of the policymakers and say, here's why you should make the decision to invest more resources, what would you say?
Well, I think if you want to attract more people into these kinds of programs, you do have to give them a little bit of an incentive. At the same time, you can, and I don't want to say the quality of a volunteer would go down or the quality of service would, if there was too much of a benefit, and then you might end up with somebody who's just there for a paycheck. But I think there is a way to help the people actually running the programs so that they are able to offer something to the people who come into these programs. Because you have the individual, yes, they'll get something out of it. Even if they didn't want to, they're going to end up getting something out of it. But the people who have to run the programs, who are on the ground with these guys who are the boots on the ground, there's people that have to run that. And they just need access to just a little bit more to make things get done. I'm sure we could have much larger programs out there if they had access. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be funding so much as guidance. How can I improve my program? Where can I take it? Things like that.
Terrific. So this is the last question before we go to the audience. So let's step into the time machine. So General McChrystal leads the Service Year Alliance, has put out the goal that we should get to 1 million people in full-time national service within 10 years. So let's say it's 10 years from now and we've achieved that goal. From your experience, what kind of impact would that have on our country, on our communities in our country? How would America be different if we had 1 million people a year doing what you all are doing? Who wants to go first on that?
I guess I'll take
go
that.
for it.
As I said before, the whole "it's not about you," idea. I think that it's extremely difficult for me to not talk about politics while having this discussion, because I think there's a lot that goes into play with a lot of those decisions. However, if this was 10 years in the future, everything was going the way that it would, I do think the country would be much more resilient than it currently is. A lot of those things that divide us, because I've heard that talked about pretty much in every single panel. Every single speaker has said something to a degree, about division. And I actually have a couple of my members of my team in the back. I'm super happy that they were able to show up. But my team is extremely diverse. I have met people with different political, religious, socioeconomic backgrounds than my own, and yet we are all still able to do the job that needs to be done. And I'm able to have conversations with them where they're not arguments. I'm able to be able to find ways to deal with people. And I think I'm translating that to the question to say that because I am around these people that are not like me, it makes me, I think, a better person because I have a different understanding and perspective on what other people are going through, what their situations are like, what their lives are like. I think that a lot of times, a lot of us live from this tower, so to speak. We see other things going on, but we don't really pay that much attention to it. So being a part of something like AmeriCorps and actually being out there, boots on the ground, so to speak, actually dealing with people, on a daily basis, that really changes your perspective on the entire world. And if we could get 1 million plus people to all think of every single person as a neighbor, as a community partner, as someone that we can collaborate with, then that makes the entire country that much better. It allows us to put much more effort and funding into other things because now our country is at the point in which we can do those things. But until we get to a point where people are able to see everyone as, I don't remember who said it before, but as opponents, not enemies, until we're able to get to that point, then I don't think that any of that can change. So in the future, I really, really think that the country would be so much more resilient. We would have more ability to do other things that we need to do to take care of our country.
Thank you. It's very powerful. William, you said something which I thought a lot of people sort of gasped in the room. You said 50 kids for one teacher. So if we could get to, and we should have more AmeriCorps people if there was funding, we could reduce that ratio to 25 or even 20 if we had more AmeriCorps folks in Elkins. So what would you say to folks if we get to 1 million people a year? How do you think that would change the country and also affect rural communities like yours?
I think it went off again. I think it could benefit West Virginia a lot because then there would be more people willing to get into schools and volunteer to mentor. It was hard enough to even get me to do it because there's not a lot of people that want to take that initiative or go back into the schools into a realm they failed in. So if West Virginia does have the most AmeriCorps workers in any state. So I don't see why we don't have the resources to do that. But if we were to get to 1 million, I'm sure we can make some wonderful things happen in the schools and in the other youth builds as well.
Thank you. Taylor, what's your view? What would happen to America? I mean, you've worked with Habitat, you did Jumpstart. What would happen to America if we actually got to 1 million people a year doing a year of service like you all have done?
I think overall we would have a more civically engaged society. I think that we would all start to see each other as neighbors. Kind of similarly to what we've all said, I've never really seen a more diverse spot than a Habitat for Humanity work site. I encounter people every day of completely different backgrounds, political views, religious views, everything like that. But you're all coming together to get the task done, to build the house for a family who's also working hard to get that house built. And so I think that engaging people in service like that makes them start to see somebody who's different, truly as their neighbor, which, this idea was mentioned in previous panels, but it really fosters that respect and allows you to see other perspectives. And so I think that, having 1 million people, sure, there's also all of the direct impacts of their service, but I also think it would create a more engaged and more empathetic society that could really help unite us.
It's very powerful, and Habitat's a great example. For every single AmeriCorps member who serves full-time, they leverage, on average, 25 volunteers. So if we had 1 million people, that'd be 25 million. Your point is really good. 25 million Americans engaging in service just through those AmeriCorps members. So we are now at the fun part where you get to ask questions. So I want to open up to the audience, please. Love that. Your hand's already up. I'm going to go to you first. Just stand up and say who you are and your name before you ask your question, okay? Thank you. Yeah. Let's see. Get her another mic.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Burris, and I'm a Senior Policy Associate at the Century Foundation. Before that, I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer in Rwanda, and I did some recruitment for NCCC and worked at CNCS in the General Counsel's Department.
I just want to say she's not a plant.
I was the first person of color to serve in my village in Rwanda, and so I'm interested in knowing, when you all speak about diversity, what are some of the best practices that you have seen, or how can recruitment efforts be promoted to promote diversity for people of different racial and socioeconomic backgrounds?
Thank you. Anybody want to take a shot at that? How do we promote more diversity in recruitment, make sure that everybody serving represents our country? Tuan, you want to go first? Okay.
Sure. I think that's a good question. I'm trying to think, like, as I'm talking here. So I know that. So really quickly, I know that when I was debating in college, that was one of the biggest things that we saw. We saw that there were a lot of people of like particular backgrounds or particular socioeconomic status that tended to dominate, the entire arena, of debate, and then. Oh, I'm so sorry. That tended to dominate, that entire arena, and it made it difficult for other people to really join and to be successful. And so I think one of the things that that helped us out was that my coach, Chris Medina, was extremely big on recruiting people. So we would go around to different places and try to target areas that were not of that same thing that we always saw. So going to a lot more inner city areas, because I think that one of the biggest things is not making people feel like they're less than. I think that's very difficult, especially when you're trying to market or promote an idea about doing something. It's trying to make everyone feel like they're all a part of the exact same thing, regardless of who they are. So I think that there are simple things that can be done, like providing posters or flyers or things with people of different races, people of different backgrounds, because I know that with a lot of different types of media, it's difficult to see representation, and I know of myself as being a person of color, I enjoy seeing representation of myself, like in movies and other popular media. So I think that's another thing that could really be done to do that. And again, if you're going to do recruiting, I would definitely say go to places that are much more public or much more open, because a lot of public areas tend to have a much larger or more diverse mix of people. So that's my idea on that.
I would just add, I think it's a great question. When we were first starting City Year, you have to make it a top priority, and you have to be intentional about it, and you have to be strategic. So the first person we actually hired and put on the payroll at City Year wasn't me, wasn't Michael, wasn't our fundraiser, Jenny Eplett-Riley, it was Kristen Atwood, because she was our recruiting director. And what she did was she went and found mentors and feeders. So she built a coalition of faith-based leaders, of people working in the community, of people who had been guidance counselors in schools, a very diverse group, and said, just send me one young person or two. And that was a very diverse group. And they all were excited about the opportunity. And that's how we got it. And then she went around. She went to roller skating rinks. She went to churches and synagogues and mosques. She went into the community. She went to meet people where they were. And that's how we got a diverse group. But we made it our top priority. And if you're not intentional, it doesn't happen. Yes, just say who you are, please.
Is it working? Yes. Wow, it's really working now. I'm Richard Reeves. I'm from the Brookings Institution. First of all, thank you all for your service. My question is, what's the biggest challenge that you've faced as you've undergone your service, and what, if anything, could have been done to lessen that challenge?
Great question. Thank you, Richard. Who wants to take that on? Go ahead, William. Go.
So the biggest challenge that I faced being in a rural area is there's a big poverty rate. A lot of the people there are poor. So a lot of the students I had in the middle school were telling me they were hungry, they didn't have food on their table, and their parents didn't have money to get it. So I would try to urge them to go take food from the pantry in the school or ask the cooks for food, because usually they'll send them with a take-home bag if there's like an obvious reluctance to get food and things like that. But I myself couldn't bring them food. So the hardest challenge I take was trying to get them to do that and finding a resource for their parents to use to get food, which ultimately I sent them to the Catholic Charities food pantry, and they were able to get food and be good. So they're all good. But that's still a big challenge I faced and continue to face as I've worked in the middle school.
Thank you. Anybody else want to? Andrew.
One word, funding. The biggest issue is, how can you fund these programs? How can I get the equipment that I need to keep this program going? We can get the bodies. As we've heard, there are bodies there that want to do this, and there's just not AmeriCorps slots. But then how do we sustain this program and keep it going?
Thank you. Yes, back here. And then to Steve after.
Oh, sorry.
No. You're first. Just say your name.
Thanks, Doug Irely, Youth Build. So for each panelist, 10 seconds or less, you're talking to a neighbor, a friend, a stranger, a colleague, and you're going to say, what was the number one best takeaway from doing a service year? What is it?
I love that. Speed round. All right. Why don't we start with Taylor? 10 seconds, best takeaway.
My best takeaway from my previous year and also a little bit from this year is you put me on the spot.
I know.
I think I would say that back in Denver, working with the Habitat homeowners that I got an opportunity to build alongside, they were all from very diverse backgrounds. A lot of them were Middle Eastern, and we spoke completely different languages. But through that universal language of building, as we like to say at Habitat, we were able to unite across different backgrounds, across different languages. And I think that is a common theme that you will find throughout all AmeriCorps programs, is that there's always something that will unite you to the people that you're serving with, and you can take that and use it throughout the rest of your life to find ways to unite with people that you may look at or hear about and say, wow, what do I have in common with them? But you can take that throughout your life and keep running with that, which will lead to that more engaged society. Sorry, that was a lot longer than 10 seconds.
That was an outstanding answer for being put on the spot.
I had to think about it for a second.
There you go. That's fine. Okay, Andrew, you've had a little time.
Teamwork. Operating as part of a group again. For a lot of the veterans returning, there's a sense of belonging that you kind of are looking for, and it's hard to find that. Public service in all types of public and private service. When you serve again in a team, it gives you that sense of belonging again.
Kayla?
My biggest takeaway is student growth. In the beginning, you have a bunch of kids that aren't necessarily on grade level, and seeing how far they've come by the end of the year is honestly amazing. One of my students, she was the highest grower in math from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. She spoke no English when she got there, and now we have full conversations. It's just amazing to see how far she has come in just a year.
Well, okay. Kayla kind of stole mine, so no, it's okay. But I think that for me, it's the development of my members. So being a team leader and having a team now of 6 people, and seeing just how much that they've grown from the beginning of this service year till now has been. I mean, I don't have words to explain. It's just so amazing to know that. They went from being one way and having one particular worldview to completely changing that and having a much better outlook on their entire lives. And yeah.
My biggest takeaways are that I was able to build myself back up and strengthen my ties with my community at the same time. Because my life is so much different and better now, and I owe that to AmeriCorps and the people I met along the way for that.
Very powerful. What about time? I know, Steve, you've got a question, so if you could, we'll just do it very quickly.
Mine is also a 10-second. Steve Culbertson from Youth Service America. Mine's also a 10-second each, so you got to talk quickly here. You know, I like to say that nobody flips a thermostat when you're 18 and all of a sudden you're civically engaged. Michael Phelps did not jump in the pool when he was 18 and start swimming. What happened to you as a child? Name a person or an event that happened to you as a child that gave you the confidence to be providing the service that you did. And by the way, thank you again for that. So just want to hear a quick anecdote, person, teacher, parent, or experience.
Don't put anybody on the spot. Who wants to take that one?
What triggered you?
My mother taught public school for 25 years just outside of Philadelphia, and that essentially to do that for 25 years, yeah, I can go out and give what little bit I have to everybody else.
William?
So from an early age, I was always inspired by my grandmother. She was the most selfless person I ever met and did everything for herself and was very independent. She unfortunately was diagnosed with ovarian cancer about 10 months before I joined Youth Build, and she always wanted to see me graduate. And she unfortunately passed away a month before my graduation, but I know she's here with me right now, and she's very proud of me.
Anybody else? Kayla.
This question, I have numerous people that could that attributed to my service. However, I would give this to my 4th grade teacher, Miss Menino. She gave me an award called the Mr. Goodbar Award for helping one of my fellow my peers in the class. She had learning disabilities, and she gave me the award. Miss Menino gave me the award because I took time out to help her get her work done, to explain things to her with patience. And so I feel like that has shaped my experience with City Year as well. So thanks, Miss Menino.
Anybody else?
Sure, I'll go. One of my high school teachers, her name was Miss Heverling. She really was the person who taught me how to meet everybody where they're at, and she did that with each of her students. And I think that has helped me through my past year of service and my current year, because whether you're working with volunteers or you're building alongside Habitat homeowners, you have to meet everybody where they're at and grow together toward a greater goal.
Great. Did I miss anybody on that? Oh, yeah.
So really quickly, probably my mentor, Mr. Wesley Wilson. I used to enjoy quitting things. It's super easy to start stuff, and it's really hard to finish things. And I used to really enjoy quitting because it was easy. And Mr. West, he challenged me, and we took it a step at a time, month by month. He would challenge me, different things. And I loved fighting for stuff. I love having a goal to reach. So that's the way that he was able to get me to do things consistently, was by providing me with some kind of reward at the end of each month, every time that I did something. And eventually it translated over into doing national service because, as everyone up here, and I'm sure several of you out there, especially for those who are in the military, can understand and attest to the fact that it gets really, really difficult sometimes. Doing this, being homesick, being far away from your family, all this, it's really, really hard, but it's extremely rewarding at the same time. So
It's terrific. So I want to end with a final question for you all. I was really struck, Andrew, by what you said at the beginning. Raise your hand if you believe that if you have the ability and the opportunity to affect positive change in someone else's life, you have a moral obligation to do so. Just raise your hand. I knew we were preaching to the choir. All right, can we hear it for this, the best panel of the day? Thank you. You guys did a fabulous job.
Inspiring. I mean, I just loved this last panel. But I want to thank everyone who came today, all of the panelists, and obviously all of you. It's been really uplifting and inspiring. And I want to really acknowledge the people who were key to putting this event together. Above all, Morgan Welch, sitting here in the front row. Stand up, Morgan. And Anna Dawson. And Sarah. Where is Sarah and Zal? Oh, and Sarah, happy birthday. Sarah. She had to work doubly hard on her birthday, but we'll give her some time off some other time. So I want you may be wondering why it is that there's the name Brookings Future of the Middle Class Initiative up here. And I want to take just a minute to make the connection here, especially since my colleague Richard Reeves, who directs the project, is here now. Our premise, I think, in working on the future of the middle class is that a democracy doesn't flourish without a strong middle class. And I think we are going to focus in the coming year on producing some kind of a report that brings together our work in this area. And we are, of course, going to focus on the usual things that people focus on when they talk about the middle class, what's happening to their incomes. Do we have a big problem with income equality in this country? What about their health? What about jobs and wages? And what about work-family balance? We're going to take on all those issues, but I think what's going to be somewhat distinctive about our approach is reflected in today's meeting. We're also going to care about and do research on and writing about relationships and respect. Relationships in your family, in your workplace, in your community, how you deal with other individuals in an attitude of respect. I think we have, as Alan put it, been looking at issues through the wrong lens, and we need to really come back to restoring what he called the soul of America. And America is an affluent country. We have lots of resources, but we do need to worry about these less tangible elements of our life together. So I'm very hopeful that we can address these issues, and this has been a great beginning. And as Bill Galston and others said, it's a reality test. It's not just about talking about respect and relationships in a vacuum. It's talking about what we could actually do about it. Or as John Allen said, it's the first step from policy to action. So I think we're very privileged to have had such a great group here today. I certainly want to thank my colleagues at Service Year Alliance, including Tay and Kevin, by the way. And thank you all for coming and for sharing your thoughts and your questions with us. We hope to see you again soon.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos from Brookings.